and gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules, and at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. We got a special show for you tonight, I think. I'm really excited about it, and that's usually a good sign that it's going to be a great show. Our guest this evening is Fred Andersson, and that's right, Fred, right? Yeah, okay. I was like, correct. I don't know, do I hang on the S for a little bit? There's two S's.
Sounded good to me.
There you go. Fred Andersson, folks in the scene probably know who he is. They probably heard him recently on some shows, especially towards, I guess this is January now, so in the fall, as he is the author of the new book, Northern Lights, High Strangeness in Sweden. He is a researcher of high strangeness and particularly UFOs and humanoids in Sweden. And it didn't dawn on me till I had booked Fred to come on the show, and I had actually seen the pictures, but I kind of hadn't all really put it all together. And I'm like, oh, he's friends with Klaus Svahn, who we had on Binnall of America back in 2009, which is crazy. So we were doing UFOs and Klaus Svahn's first ever American podcast interview. So. Yeah, we were doing UFOs in Sweden back in 2009, folks. So I don't know, 15 years ago or something. And it was a fantastic interview, and I feel old now because Fred's like, he's kind of like my mentor. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I've been in this too long now. I've been interviewing the guy, now I'm interviewing his protege. Like, this is crazy. My mother's a school teacher. It happens to her. She gets a kid. She's been doing it for 50 years. She's taught now 2 generations, maybe even 3 of, one or 2 particular families. It's crazy. So the book is Northern Lights, High Strangeness in Sweden. And as I was telling Fred before we get on the air, I try to time my reading of the books with the interview, because if I read the book like a month earlier, I'm going to forget all the stuff. So I just sort of started reading towards the middle of this week, right after Christmas, and wrapped up the book 3-4 hours ago this afternoon. So it's pretty fresh in my mind. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It's you were saying earlier, this is your second language, I presume, or maybe you might be, folks in Europe speak multiple. It might be your third or fourth. I don't know. It's certainly a second language of yours. And it was beautifully written, man. You should be very proud of yourself. It was captivating. It was thought-provoking. It was thoughtful. We'll get into some of these other parts of it. It was philosophical in a lot of ways. It really spoke to me, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I really, I was just like, I really kind of devoured it over the last few days reading it and enjoyed it quite a bit. As I said, it's beautifully written. You should be very proud of yourself, and hugely informative, of course. Tons of stories that most folks have probably never heard, especially folks in the UFO world. These are a lot of fresh stories here in this book. Oh yeah.
First of all, I'm happy you like it. It's always nervous to go on a podcast when someone read the book, and sometimes, to be honest, I kind of sensed that they didn't like the book that much.
I can see that.
Yeah. So
maybe they're not as effusive in their praise as I was. I should have. I stepped on myself here. Fred Andersson, welcome to Binnall of America. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for doing the show. There we go. Now my OCD can relax. Anyway, I'm happy you mentioned the other parts of the book. I mean, to be honest, the idea from the beginning was to just write a typical 1 chapter, 1 case, tell it all, the information, and then get over it. But I felt when I started to write these chapters about these cases that it led me somewhere else all the time, or to folklore, or to other cases and something. So but personally, when I read the book, which I don't do often, but sometimes I have to read,
to read it. It kind of feels a little bit like a stream of consciousness sometimes when I write, and that probably was because it was a stream of consciousness writing going on there.
I like that about the book, though. It's conversational almost. It was very. You would sort of make a point, and then you'd be back. Well, let's revisit that in a moment, or something like that. And I was like, all right, I like that a lot. It was very down to earth, no pun intended, considering the subject matter. But yeah. So as we traditionally start on the show with new guests, what's the bio, the background? Who is Fred Andersson? How'd you get interested in all this? I love the story at the beginning about going to the UFO thing in the bus depot. It was like, oh my God. I've heard these kind of stories from a lot of folks who've been on the show over the years. Steve Berg being dropped off at the MUFON convention, like at the age of 8 or something like that. But so give us the bio, the background. How'd you get interested in this stuff? Sounds like you've had a storied, pretty seasoned career in this part. You're a big part of UFO Sweden. As I said, Klaus Fahn. It was like, wow, this is really cool. So tell us your bio, your background, and how you got mixed up in all this.
Oh yeah. I'm raised in what you could call a kind of religious cult. So we lived a bit, we didn't have that much contact with people around. Because my mom had some issues and she found Jesus, and we ended up at this place. And as a kid, I was very, very skeptical. So I kept the distance to everything that happened there. But I saw so many weird things, or heard, from, talking in tongues and healings and miracles, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I was skeptical about it because I have a difficult time to accept that there would be some almighty ruler somewhere who controls everything we do. I found that silly even as a kid. So I kind of studied the weirdness that was going on. And somehow along the way, my mom gave me, she's a great mom, by the way, even if she was in that environment, she gave me a book about UFOs, and a Swedish book. And that, made me fall in love with the subject. And it was a quite critical book also, quite skeptical, but so much information, so much cool images and photos, of course, because that's what I wanted as a kid. So it's some kind of merge between that religious upbringing and just getting a UFO book in my hands as a kid. It was a great mix somehow, even if it was traumatic.
Interesting. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. That's my theory, at least. I like horror movies a lot, and I think that it might be because all of those gory Jesus paintings in church, it has some it could have been something like that. I don't know.
Interesting. So did you now you're part of UFO Sweden. So I'm trying to follow sort of in a sense, like your path. Some people, it sounds like UFO Sweden is and I mean this with all due respect, it's kind of like MUFON, it's sort of like the national UFO group. And that's all due respect to UFO Sweden, not MUFON. But so I'm imagine, so you kind of got involved with this group and became like a part of this and became in the field, if you will, more than just like someone who was a fan, in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it began a little bit earlier than that because I was a hugely skeptical person for a number of years, maybe kind of as a revolt against myself, coming from the upbringing I had. So it wasn't until, I don't remember when it was, but I was working as a segment producer for a paranormal show called Det Okända. And I did so many interviews with people who had experienced something out of the ordinary. So I kind of just started to change my mind a little bit. When I started it, I had this idea that everyone is insane. because that was how my life was at the time. So I felt, this is absurd. But when you sit down and talk with people, so many, and I mean, it's starting to grow on you. This whole idea with something else than just our, consensus reality we have around us. There is something more. So I kind of just started my UFO interest again, and did a subscription on UFO Sweden's magazine, which is great, by the way, and slowly got more and more involved in the organization, which I didn't even expect all the drama, because everyone thinks that we're either tinfoil hats or that we're a debunker organization, and and it's nothing like that. It's just the mystery. What the hell is it? That's flying around.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm going to pull a quote from you. I'll probably do this a few times in the course of the interview because as I'm reading the book, I made sort of notes in here. But I found it really interesting, and it's borne out in the book. But you say the presence of the extraordinary inside the out of the ordinary, that makes me feel alive. And it's ironic that you say that, because I just talked to Greg Bishop for the Year in Review show like 2 to 3 days ago. And he mentioned that Jacques Vallée at the Seoul conference was like, we have to start looking for the really weird cases because that's where the weird stuff is. So it's sort of the same idea. Mm-hmm. It must be kind of in the zeitgeist, I guess, right now. But and then, as I said, it's borne out in the book because a lot of the cases are really just the ones that are strange, the really strange stuff, the strange within the UFO sighting. It's like there's a UFO sighting, but now it takes a really strange turn. I guess sort of just talk about that theme or that idea that you explore in the book.
Yeah, I mean, for me, a few interesting dots in the sky can be a mystery by itself. But I mean, I'm talking from my own, personal perspective here. That with the strange parts, the strangeness that might show up, it gives a boost to. It gives a boost and what's the word in English here? Kind of, at least for me, it triggers my imagination because I feel that there is imagination in the works, and that if that imagination is a creation by the witness or the phenomenon or a combination, it's thoughts like that intrigues me with it. I just like it when it turns not normal, because I mean tic-tacs and go fast and everything like that are, to be honest, quite boring. I need something else to feel happy with it. And what's interesting too is there's a richness to those cases, a lot of them in the book too. There's a level of detail that you're not going to get just from lights in the sky, where it's like, okay, now the guy showed up, and it's like, all right, now you're really dealing with some wild stuff. You're getting more information than you would from, there's a light in the sky, it was about this big, it moved this fast. You kind of run out of options. When it like lands and does something weird, or there's a humanoid involved, then you're dealing with a whole nother layer of information that you just can't wrap your arms around with a standard UFO sighting. Have you read Whitley Strieber's latest book, Them?
No, I haven't.
I kind of had given up on Strieber. I read Communion, which I like a lot. I think it's a great book and some early weirdness there. But for some reason, I decided to buy Them. I did it, and I found this very interesting because I think it's one of the few books, maybe the only book so far I read, where he analyzes cases that people have sent him, people's own personal experiences, and he looks at them from a symbolic viewpoint.
Oh,
so he kind of, okay, the humanoid looked like this, did like this. That could be a language by itself, hieroglyphs, you can say, in some kind of reality mode. And I enjoyed that take a lot, when it came to analyzing high strangeness, because in some way I kind of sense that he might be right there, that it's a very highly subjective language we're looking at. Or maybe I'm taking it too seriously now. Now I sound really seriously here, but serious.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think it's, there's something beyond what we think we've been dealing with for all this time. It's certainly, it's way more complicated than you see like on TV, where they're like, it's alien. It's like, some of them might just be aliens. I don't rule that out, but it's a lot of times it's like beauty's in the eye of the beholder. It's like it's in the eye of whatever they're seeing, these people who have these experiences. Well, we'll start right on page 1, actually, because I already hit the introduction, but you made an interesting point. It was one of those things, no pun intended, where like a light went off. I'm like, I never even thought of it that way. But you sort of make the observation that lights are signs of living stuff. You kind of liken, the human fascination with UFOs to like animals with shiny objects. And it's like, well, we kind of have this fascination with light. And it's like, because lights are signs of living stuff. And I never really thought about that. But when you really kind of apply it to any form of light, it's true. It's like, the sun is alive in a sense, stars are alive, but it's like a light. If you see a light somewhere, it has to have emanated like from someone with a light or some kind of human creation that produces light, for the most part, or hey, bioluminescent fish or whatever. Still, it's a living thing. So it's a really interesting observation that I never sort of had even considered before. So thank you for that.
Well, it's my pleasure. Absolutely. I mean, it's I can once again only go to myself, because I spend a lot of time, at least in the summer, because it's so cold here now. It's not cold, but it's nasty. I spend a lot of time in nature, outdoors, even late at night, and when I see a light, I see a human walking out in the forest or on some countryside road, or maybe a city far away or a town far away, houses. It gives me such a comfortable feeling. Maybe not meeting a human outside in the forest in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
That would be really, really scary. But I've had several. I can't find the word there, but I love sitting on hills outside civilization and look at the civilization, look at the lights down there, the life down there, and it's like, I feel like getting so mumbo jumbo here now. But yeah,
it's all right.
I feel that the light itself is so important because it obviously attracts our fascination. It can be scary, it can be beautiful, but it's there. And in many humanoid cases, not all of course, but a bunch of them, the humanoid often have a box on its belly with a bright light coming from it, for example, or a flash. Once again, those lamps, attracting flies and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is very interesting. Yeah, I can imagine overlooking the thought that mine was like an ant farm. You're overlooking a city. It's kind of like you're watching an ant farm in a way. Now, I purposely tried to keep my notes away from sort of this call and response, like tell this story from the book, because I'm sure you run into that a lot when you do podcasts anyway. But there's a couple in here, but there's one story that like really jumped out at me that I wanted to know more about, and that's because it involves you. So you could probably add more color to even maybe what you had in the book. And this is the Loam story of this character that keeps showing up at your house. So I guess tell us this story, and I'll probably hit you with some follow-up questions, because it's very, very weird. I can't quite wrap my mind around it. I'd be really troubled by it. Maybe you were, but tell the story, and so folks can catch up on what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This was a couple of years ago. I do not remember which year. And I was doing research for the book about Men in Black, Swedish Men in Black. cases because I always enjoyed the Swedish view on it.
Right.
And I was, digging quite deep. There's not so many cases with Men in Black here, but I found a couple. When you write, you always go around thinking about the chapters, the details, if you can take another, path in the text or whatever. So I was very, very deep in it at the time. And I was walking home from the store up to the building where we live. And I passed a guy. A man was walking towards me and passed me. And I kind of sensed that his attention got caught, when he passed me. And so I continued to walk, and I felt that someone is looking at me. I feel that someone is staring at me. So I turn around and I see the man standing, like fucking Michael Myers, basically on the
Jesus.
Hands down and looking at me. And I feel, okay, I will hurry home here. So I like you never should. I do a shortcut through a park, which is like the best place ever to get killed or attacked. I've seen so many movies, but I do that anyway because I know the park. And I look back and I see that he's following me. And when I stop and I look, he's just standing there once again, like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees or a Man in Black. I don't know. Right. So I continue home and I lock the door and everything is fine. I don't remember how long after, but I'm in the living room and I see how the cats are focusing on something in the hallway, which I find weird. So I go and check on the cats and I see that they're studying the door to the apartment. And I can see how the handle is moving slowly up.
Yeah.
I
really love the story. I'm like, holy shit.
Like a horror movie. Really.
Yeah.
I was so weird. And I look out the what do you call it? The peephole? No, the
peephole.
Yeah, and I see this guy standing outside my door, very, very close to it, touching the handle. And because I'm stupid, because I never, I open the door and I ask, what do you want? Are you looking for someone? And the guy asks for Loam or Loam. I actually don't remember now how I pronounce it, but Loam. And I asked, there's no Loam here. There's nothing. Loam. He wants to see Loam. I said, sorry, there is no Loam here. And I close the door and he continues to stand outside, close to the door. I call friends and, I can't do so much. I mean, he haven't threatened me or anything. He just standing there. So what can I do? So this starts like a month of daily visits by the Loam guy. He's standing outside the door. He one night around midnight he uses the doorbell and really upsets my partner here. And another night we find him outside, standing looking up at the balcony, and I can only see his white eyes glimmering in the light, which was really, really scary. So I started to, it was, but the fun thing, and I know it's probably tragic because after a month with this guy, he was like a buddy. I mean, when you came home from work, he was standing by the door asking for lamb, and you said hello, and it was. It was
you just get used to it. Yeah. Was he like? Did he like ask? Was he like, is Loam here, or did he just say Loam? Was he like? No,
I think he mixed a little bit. Sometimes Loam, and sometimes is Loam here, or similar words.
But never anything else beyond that.
No, never anything.
That's so weird.
Yeah, and I was like. Because me, I'm like wondering, what is Loam? Is that a name? Is it something else? And so I don't remember the order here, but I think I use Alan Greenfield's The Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts, and I write the word Loam in it. And the words that comes up is just only soul and lurking and shadows, very dark words, And I also realized that luam is a certain form of soil. You mix some soil so it gets kind of muddy and you use it in the garden. It's also spelled lam, L-A-M, which of course is the entity that Aleister Crowley contacted a long time ago and drew the infamous painting of or drawing of the entity Lam, or maybe it's a self-portrait of Crowley himself. But the Lam guy disappeared. I haven't seen him since.
So weird.
Yeah,
Did he look like? What did he look like? Was he just look like a normal dude?
He looks. He had a. I'm afraid he wasn't dressed in a suit or an old-fashioned hat or anything. That would have looked like a quite normal dude. He had a hoodie also, so it's kind of covered, so you can often his face was in shadow. But I always thought, not always, but after an incident involving shrooms a couple of years ago, I've come to the idea that the phenomena can take people and animals and other things as proxies for itself. Like it wants to be seen, but it doesn't want to be revealed. So that's why people, for example, meet Men in Black or other weird creature. It's just how the phenomenon is, affecting their perception, basically. Right. Which is absolutely makes no sense at all, but that's my theory. Anyway, that was a scary phase of my life, and I'm happy he's somewhere else now.
Did you? Part of me would be like, I feel like I would lose. Like you said, you got kind of used to it, but I feel like at some point I'd kind of lose my shit and be like, dude, like get the fuck out of here. Whatever, you know what I mean? You must be a lot nicer than I am. I think the fear would drive me to the fight response would eventually come up, where I'd be like, if I fucking see you back on my doorstep again, Loam, I would start calling him Loam. First of all, I'd be like, you're Loam, dude. That's all I know about you, man. So, did you ever try to engage him and be like, hey, man, why do you keep coming back here or anything like that?
Well, here's the thing. I'm a very non-confrontative person.
I generally am too. But someone says I'm in the house for a month straight. I think
I remember when he rang the doorbell at midnight. I remember my partner got pretty pissed off.
I can imagine.
I'm more. I feel very, of course, very. I'm not sure what's going on, because it's so different from my ordinary realities. I don't know what to do, really.
Yeah.
The Luam guy, I almost said I kind of miss him, but I don't. Because I don't want him to show up here.
Oh, he's going to hear us talking about it.
Yeah.
Show up.
The odd thing, I have to mention it. I probably mentioned it somewhere else. It's not in the book. Is that a while later, I was. A friend sent me a photo of some weird tracks in Norway, and we were joking that it must be troll footprints because they look like that. And so that was fun, ha ha ha, cool photos. A few hours later, I got an email saying from some British production company saying, "Can we use this photo of you and the troll?" Because my partner took a photo of me and. With some kind of pareidolia effect, it looks like it's a troll standing behind me, kind of.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I like the photo a lot, and I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. So we have two troll things in one day suddenly from nowhere. And later that evening, I was going to the store through the park I mentioned earlier, and exactly at the same spot where this guy stood looking at me in the park, exactly at the same spot. I see something. I see it looks like a tiny humanoid, something weird on the trail. And I walk closer to it, and it's a small wooden troll Someone had someone had carved a troll and put it there. Of course, I still have it. I took it directly.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's a little added flavor to that story.
Wow. Now, something that really caused me to raise my eyebrows as I was reading the book, and I don't even know if this is like possible to do as a book, but if you write anything, I'm sure you're going to write other stuff in the future. What I loved about Northern Lights is I'm kind of a student of the history of the people in the phenomenon, if you will, the history of people studying the phenomenon. And there's all kinds of great sort of little nuggets in there about different people in Swedish ufology who had a role in different stuff. And it was really, really cool. So, yeah, I would love to read, even if it's just a long essay, sort of like a history of Swedish ufology. We'll get into this a little bit more in a sense, because it sounds like a very rich community over there, which is awesome. But there was one character you mentioned, and I'm like, this raised my eyebrows to like, oh, wait a minute. And maybe just saying that, you already know who I'm talking about. But this guy, Jan Ove Sundberg, who you describe as a notorious hoaxer, compulsive liar. So I'm like, all right, I really like this guy. Then you're like, stalker. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And then they say, and many other even more horrifying things. So, yes. So at the risk of telling tales out of school, talk about this character, Jan Ove Sundberg, who he reminded me of the guy who was a Gray Barker who kind of came up with the Men in Black thing. And he comes up and he seems like the guy who kind of popularized the Men in Black in Sweden. He was sort of the guy who was talking about it. But what are these many other horrifying things? What is this cat all about? All right. Who is this Jan Ove Sundberg? Because he sounds like villainous. And I'm like, oh, shit, what's this guy's deal?
Jan Ove Sundberg is, for a long time, he was some kind of legend in Swedish ufology for those who didn't know him. And let me point out that I didn't know him. He passed away now, so that's why I could write about him. He began his career in the beginning of the 70s within UFO Sverige and UFO Sweden and other local organizations. And he had a great fascination for cryptids. So he did the expeditions at Loch Ness, for example, and he did that up until, quite late in his life, especially, lake monsters. He loved them. The thing with Jan Ove is that you notice he had a serious side, but he also he made all the stories a little bit larger, and that's, I'm fine with that because I love that kind of, speculative journalism in this field. I don't mind it really. The problem was, I'd say that he began to made up completely new stories.
Yeah, fabricated.
Fabricated. He pretended to be the writer of a letter who wrote in a fascinating story. And so even if his name isn't under the text, you can often see that, okay, this is written by Jan Ove. So Jan Ove got crazier and crazier. He actually stalked Claes Svan, our friend here.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's the stalking part. All right.
Yeah.
What?
He stalked Claes. He stalked Claes' parents.
Jesus. I don't mean to laugh. That's crazy, yeah. Jesus.
Yeah, he even released his own local magazine that only was about how evil Claes Svan is.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's insane, actually. And
yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, so, well, and anyway, I didn't know this before I wrote the book, and I decided, okay, fuck it. I just added that he's a horrible person. But before he died, he was also in prison for sexually molesting children.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the more horrifying thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I thought it might be something. Yeah, I thought you might be alluding to something particularly egregious, but I'm like, I don't know with this field. Who the fuck knows,
Yeah. But wow. he was quite the character, yeah. And he he had a very un-Swedish way of doing investigations and writing books and articles, and I enjoy that. It kind of just got very, very tainted by the pedophile thing towards the end of it.
Yeah.
It's like
Jesus.
He's not fun really anymore.
No, he's a villain. He's a total villain.
Yeah, exactly.
Monster.
It's a pity because he made up stories about Loch Ness and UFOs and Men in Black, and but sometimes you also feel that he probably took a story somewhere and he just added some details to it. So I mean, many of the Frogmen in Black stories I have in the book is from his archive of stories. But as I also mentioned, you shouldn't trust this guy. But it's interesting to at least see the stories have some kind of life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like a dark turn.
Yeah, I know.
I thought he was just like an eccentric character. Now I'm like, oh no, he's a fucking asshole. All right.
Well, what can I say?
Well, we'll move on to a different ufologist that you mentioned in the book, and that's Bevan Berthelsen. What I found interesting here is you say he was a UFO researcher for about 8 years. Then he left the community and joined with his wife the spiritual movement Subud. So what is Subud? And that's a very believable in a way kind of transition if you think about it. It's like if you're into UFOs, I can see kind of you move into some other. You're done with. I don't want UFOs anymore. I'm tapped into this spiritual movement. But what was the spiritual movement? It was like the 80s or something, or relatively.
Yeah, I mean, it still exists. To be honest, I haven't looked so close at it. It seems like it's based on some kind of Hindu mythology belief. It clearly belongs as a 70s invention. Because so many things like that happened in Sweden, and he ended up in it. The 70s was such an interesting period in UFO-Sverige, or the UFO community in Sweden, because it had this weird 70s ultra bizarre mix of esoterica and the occult and lots and lots of drugs, and then you had UFOs in the middle of it. So, I mean, this created a huge split in UFO Sweden in the beginning of the 80s, where you had the believers who had a more esoteric view on it, and then you had those who believed everything was nuts and bolts, basically. So they had a fight. And it was almost destroyed the whole organization there. Nowadays, everyone has become friends again, but we're trying to keep it on a professional level,
Well, that was kind of what happened in America with the, I think APRA was more open to the, occupants situation, and the other organizations were like, we're not dealing with occupants right now. We're just trying to figure out what the lights are. So.
Well, one thing is for sure that, I mean, UFOs and humanoids in Sweden was way more fun in the 60s and 70s compared to what it is today, which it seems to be something that is all over the world. I mean, the fun humanoid cases you found in the 70s or 60s, at least here. And nowadays it's just dots in the sky. And I think that's so boring. It's once again going back to this imagination thing. Sorry, my English.
Okay, you're doing fine now.
It's like it lacks power,
Yeah. That's an interesting observation. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
I think we're so oversaturated with information and images and stuff that we don't have the imagination to manifest these things. Because I personally feels it has to do with ourselves. It could of course be some other kind of intelligence, something else, but I still think it's a part of us.
Well, I wonder if it's I kind of talked a little bit about this with Steve Berg way back when we first relaunched the show, but it was like, now that we have the internet, you can, if you want to learn about Egypt, you can just fucking learn about it. Like, you can just go online and spend all day learning about it. And back in the day, you had to put the work in, and you had to go and get books at the library or buy them or whatever. It was a lot more difficult. So I wonder if, in a sense, like, if imagination is like a sense, maybe it's become dulled due to people are losing that sense of wonder.
Yeah.
Where before you would dream of Egypt, you would think about it, you would kind of try to conceptualize it in your mind because all you had were like books and pictures and maybe like a documentary or two or whatever. But now it's like you could just become so immersed in the subject you don't really need to wonder about it as much. So I wonder if like the internet's caused our senses to the sense of imagination to dull.
I'm absolutely sure of it. I mean, I can sense it myself sometime where I feel like I haven't, I've had too much information. I have too much stuff in my head and I just need to, delete it somehow. It's like it's the imagination. I'm just too tired, and that's
right.
Sad, so I kind of, of course, people saw and experienced weirder things before because they kind of were forced to it. They needed to use their. Now I sound like a grumpy old man here, and I'm not going to do that. Of course, it just feels like we've lost something. We really lost something here.
Yeah, that's for sure. And like people lament about it, but it's like, look at all the reboots and sequels and shit. It's like maybe that's symptomatic of the whole thing. I don't know. It is interesting. I talked about this with Zelia Edgar like back a few years ago on the show, but it seems like, and I'm sure you can relate because it seems like that's the case in Sweden too. It's like the really fucking good cases, like these humanoid encounters, these weird encounters, not necessarily sightings, but just encounters. Like we just don't see them anymore. Like you just don't. I mean, look, I'm the news guy for Coast to Coast. Like I don't think I ever hear any stories about somebody encountering a person from outside, in the fashion that we do back in these crazy stories. So it's really weird that all of a sudden there's this drop off of humanoid encounters, and now we just don't see them at all. Like sometime in, I don't know, the 80s or whatever, or the 90s, it just kind of really fizzled out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we have like 2 humanoid encounters in Sweden in the last 20 years. Or something that we feel it is something interesting with, because you have a lot of people that are not well reporting stuff also. But here and there is some people really seeing something out of the ordinary. I remember the weirdest one. There's several ones, but this was, I think it was 2011 in Växjö. And there's a guy, he's bicycling in the morning to work. It's before 6 o'clock. And he's bicycling in the middle of, an area with villas. And, it's everyone lives there. It's in the center of town. And when he comes bicycling, he sees this giant. It's like a robotic character, like 2 meters tall with kind of animated eyes. Kind of like, what's that creature that they saw in the UK, in England in the early 70s? Like a robot clown, basically.
Oh, like the Sandown Man or whatever.
Sandown Sam, yeah, exactly. Kind of feels like that one. And he has like round feet, round underneath. So it's like, it's like, and he almost crashes into this guy walking, and then the bicyclist just drives away. He's scared, looks behind him and sees how this humanoid robotic thing kind of dissolves and fades away into nothing. I think it's kind of the last one we've had, what we know about.
Yeah.
And at least, come on. I want to go out and investigate the humanoid case, and I haven't done that yet. So.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It kind of connects to one of the other notes I have here. You mentioned that Simonton, you talk about the famous Simonton pancake story in relation to Swedish stories involving food being offered to experiencers, if you will. And you mentioned how Simonton really regretted telling the story. And you say, these details fascinate me. And it fascinates me, too, in a sense where it's like, and you mentioned, like, why the argument from the skeptics is always like, oh, they're looking for attention. And it's like, the attention these people get is not, sure, I guess some people get off on negative attention, but like, this is really, you got to be a fucking masochist to be, and these don't, a lot of people don't strike me as masochists. Like, they're children or housewives or priests or police officers or like not the kind of person you think would want to subject themselves to community ridicule, but yet they feel also compelled to share this story despite what might befall them. It's a very interesting psychological thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that also. If you have that experience, I mean, I for one would like to talk about it. I would probably sit on your podcast here and tell my humanoid story if I could tell someone about it, because I mean, would I just keep it within me? You know, I'm not sure I could handle that, you know. Then people might think I'm crazy. But yeah, I'm afraid I never met a humanoid, so I can't reveal anything like that to you. But I think it needs to get out somehow. I'm fully okay with people, you know, cashing in a little bit. If they had a weird experience, write your book or do your talk or whatever, you know. I mean, use it. You know, I sometimes I think it's unfair. You have this grifter discussion, and of course you have a lot of grifters in this subject. But sometimes just let people enjoy their lives. If they've been kidnapped by a UFO, let them talk about it. Let them earn some money. It's when you're taking advantage of people and like, exactly. Yeah. If they're like, if they suddenly form a cult or whatever, then it's like, all right, now you've gone too far. But if you want to sell your story or whatever, I really don't have a problem with that. So it's lots of people, you know, all over sell their stories. Less interesting stories all the time. So, but I'm not sure why I started to talk about that, but because probably I had a little bit of whiskey now, so my mind is going. You have a ghost behind you.
I know. It's all right. It's all right. That's my mom passing through. She'll like that. Let me see here. Oh, so one of the things that really kind of, again, another one of those things that kind of raised my eyebrows, and you might have noticed, sort of these little things. I sort of picked up on these little snippets in the book where I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting observation. Or that's a odd little moment. And at one point, there's a witness. This is a February 2nd, 1971 case. A witness finds what I believe are like some snow circles on its roof. And he says, he's talking to like a researcher, investigator, or whatever. And he says almost nonchalantly, he says, I don't believe they were elves or gnomes. They moved north a long time ago. Yes. And it just struck me as really remarkable. And the reason I mentioned the date is to sort of put in perspective, like sort of the time frame of, but then we're talking 1971. This isn't the 1800s or whatever. So it was how, I guess, talk a little bit about how ingrained that is in the culture. Maybe it's changed like in modern times. People sort of are, you know, they put on the cloak of skepticism because they don't want people to think they're silly or whatever. But talk about sort of the culture of these gnomes and elves and trolls, and I presume there's some kind of distinction between them because I can't. It's like I kind of like mix them all up, but it's quite prevalent in the Swedish culture, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have several. I call them gnomes. You know, there's like, but you have of course different versions of them. You have the farm gnome who lives at farms, often underneath the houses, and because it's always he helps out with the farm, and you need to be kind at him. It's pretty basic gnome things you find in other countries also. And then you have Vättar, which is a bit tinier creatures, humanoids, living often underneath stones or under trees or old grave mounds. I know there's similar stories in the United States about that.
Yeah.
For example. On Gotland, which is an island, you have something called the Små under jordi, the small ones underneath the soil, which is another version of them. And what I found so amazing, for me at least, is that these stories, these experiences are still, you know, going on in Sweden in this day and age. And people, I sat down on Facebook actually and started to copy people's stories when they met gnomes from recent years, and I think I copied like 150 stories.
Oh wow!
And because people are seeing them and experiencing them, I'm aware I just said that there's no humanoid sightings in Sweden, but there's a lot of gnome sightings. And of course you could of course, maybe it's the same thing, all of it. It's about perception and culture and et cetera, et cetera. But these gnomes, they have the beards, the pointy hats, the old-fashioned clothes. They live on farms and in nature. I love that they're still around. It's
amazing. It really is. It's remarkable how ingrained they are in the culture. It's like, like I said, the nonchalance with the way the guy said it. He's like, oh yeah, they moved north a long time ago. They're akin to like deer or other animals, where it's just like, oh yeah, they used to live in this area, but now they migrated north or whatever. It's like, wow, that's really really something. It's really remarkable. Like I said, it raised my eyebrows. So I was just like, wow, this guy.
Well, I mean,
cool.
My dream is maybe to do a book only about this in English, because I feel it's not so known outside Scandinavia, at least. So I'm toying with the idea, trying to write something, see how it feels, because there's so many stories to share, and there's so many ideas about what these gnomes really are. I mean, once upon a time, they were feared like gods. They were like known gods living on farms, and it was, of course, it's a heretic thing to not worship God, but to worship the gnomes instead.
Oh, wow.
And according to other stories, there were actually... Have I told this story? No. They were actually minions or devils thrown out from heaven together with Lucifer. So when they landed in the forest, they became trolls, or in the mountains, they became trolls, and on farms, they became gnomes. So they were kind of feared for a long time, felt like they were kind of demonic creatures, basically. But of course, that have changed since then. I love those little fellas. I do.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's just talking about how people are having these encounters still. It's almost hard for me to wrap my mind around, like a culture where it's accepted and sort of celebrated and embraced to the point where people feel okay, where they're like, yeah, I've seen these things. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare you read about it in media or, television nowadays, but you have to, go and talk with people and look at what people write down, because there's where the stories are. I mean, the beliefs in ghosts is a big thing in Sweden. For example, it's always been more okay to talk about ghosts than UFOs, because UFOs, UFOs is a bit more strange. Everything, it's not just your grandma floating around in the kitchen saying something nice. It's like slimy humanoids doing weird stuff on the field. It's a different thing. But I do hope that we can change the stigma there is, because I think people need to be able to tell their weird stories without getting laughed at, and I think many people have an issue with that in this country, at least.
Right. Well, I think I remember talking about this with Klaus. Now, I didn't go back and listen to the show because I hate to listen to my own shit. So, and I'm like, I don't even want to know what I sounded like in 2009. So, but I read the recap, and it was it did sort of ring a bell, where it's like there's a certain and I suppose in a very different way, America has this experience, had this kind of experience because of the Cold War, but Sweden is so close to Russia that there was certainly had to be some kind of influence in a way where it was like, there's an uneasiness about lights in the sky and lights underwater and all that stuff, because it's like, we're really close to Russia. They might be, you're right on the doorstep of Russia. Certainly during the Cold War, that sort of, I can imagine, added a tinge of uneasiness to the UFO enigma.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm raised in Sweden in the 80s, and the paranoia was huge in schools. We of course saw animated movies about nuclear fallout, and we got to know how the shelters worked outside underneath the building. But I mean, connecting to what Klaus said in the episode from 2009, he talked a lot about the ghost rockets, for example, and the ghost flyers. And the ghost rockets, I find this a very, very fascinating case. It's really, really weird. But we had, as mentioned in the book, we had similar flaps connected to paranoia regarding Soviet or Russia. Russia nowadays, of course. We had the submarine craze in the 80s where people saw unknown submarines.
Yeah, I found that fascinating.
Yeah,
phantom submarines.
Yeah, it was exactly like a UFO flap, but people saw the submarine, so there were blurry photos and witnesses and stuff. And a couple of years ago, we had a drone flap around nuclear plants and official, government buildings. People suddenly saw mysterious drones flying around, and not in one single case they could find a drone. People just saw a dot. It could have been a star, it could be something else, but people reported in drones, and everyone thought it was once again Russia doing the stuff out there. So it's interesting to compare all these flaps during the years, because I think paranoia has something to do with it also.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, there's a chapter in the book that I really love because I've kind of taken an interest in this. I haven't. It's sort of the seed sort of just kind of started sprouting. Not that I hadn't heard of this all before, but now I'm like, lately I've been like, really want to get into this and hear more about this. So I was delighted when I got to the paragraph, like wings of a dragonfly, where you discuss these UFO cases that sound more like organic creatures. Because there's a part of me that wonders if one aspect, I liken the UFO phenomenon to like clouds. They're all different shapes and they kind of have different roles in the sky. So it's like, okay, maybe some are alien craft vehicles, maybe some are government, whatever. But maybe some, that small percentage, are like creatures that fucking live in the sky and we just can't, the sky is probably bigger than the ocean. So it certainly goes up into infinity. So who knows? But there's a part of me fascinated by the possibility of these things being biological creatures. I guess talk a little. I mean, I'm just going to just throw that out there as a blanket thing. I mean, you can cite a case or two in like Wings of a Butterfly if you'd like, if you want to contextualize this. But certainly, you entertain the idea of the possibility that these things are biological creatures based on some of these cases wherein they resemble or behave more like an animal than a craft.
Yeah, I mean, they're at least from our perception, they look like animals, like fishes or stingrays but of course that's what we see or what the witness see, because that's the shape they recognize. Might be something else. It's a hypothesis that I find intriguing, mostly because I desperately really want to write about cryptids, but we have so very few in Sweden. So this was kind of it was an easy way to write about possible biological creatures, but in the shape of UFOs, of course. There's a couple of really interesting ones, but I think the main case there, where I referred to the wings of a dragonfly, is really one of the more curious ones. You had this couple in the mid-'80s who was driving home from one of their mothers and sees this ball floating above the ground, and attached to the ball there's a thick string leading up to two giant wings, and everything is kind of glowing, and they hit it with the car and it bumps over the car and disappears, and they just continue to drive and they don't even talk about it because it's so weird. It happened in like 84 or 85. When I talked to them earlier this year, 2023, they still had no idea what it was. They told me the story exactly like I've heard it the first time. Yeah, there's no additions or anything like that, and they also felt that this is. I had a sense that this is their life's big mystery, because they're a successful couple. They have a little factory. They have children. Everything is nice, but it's a quite ordinary and nice life. But still, they have this object they saw one evening still hovering above them in a way that gives them some kind of curiosity, and that's something that's something I've noticed with most people I've talked with, that their curiosity on life and universe has just grown tremendously since their experience. And okay, now I'm once again, you asked the question, I'm somewhere else.
So you're right on. You're right over the target. You're all right. I was going to say, based on your description in the book, it's just dawned on me after I went on this ramble about the biological. Wouldn't Sweden, that area, kind of be ideal if you were a biological, unidentified flying creature? You say it's dark like all the fucking time, so that would be the safest place for these creatures to reside if they live in the air or whatever, So that's to me that, because if it's dark like 18 hours, whatever of the day, they can safely fly around and not be noticed for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, most of the cases actually is during the winter months, which is something I realized when I kind of was ready to write the last chapter of the book, that, everything is from like November, October to maybe February, sometimes early March, and that's the winter month in Sweden, where it's pitch black and it's quite horrifying, actually, because I hate this weather. But yeah, I believe that there is some kind of connection between people's experiences and the time of the year. I have absolutely no proof for it, except everything I've read and everyone I talked with. It's like, I mean, especially when you go out on the countryside here in Sweden, it's also in the winter. It's also it's silent. It's very, very silent, and the snow helps with that. So.
Oh yeah,
I mean, so it's like when you're alone or with someone close to you in an environment like this. It's dark, it's quiet. I feel that you somehow have an easier connection to whatever is out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
No distractions or anything like that. But I might be wrong. But that's what I feel after reading and talking with so much people. There's something out there.
Yeah, no, I certainly got that impression. That's another one. Like I said, the book really gave me a lot of food for thought. And that was another one of the sort of aspects of the book that you cited there. That, like, in the darkness, in the quiet, you're more apt to experience this thing, maybe whatever this other is, so it's very interesting. Now, you mentioned talking to one of the witnesses contemporaneously. I thought that was a really awesome aspect of the book. And I realize that you can't find a lot of these people, a lot of stuff, but in some instances you do find the people who were at the core of these classic cases. What are they happy to hear from you? It's like, that's kind of funny first. Are they like, you ring them up and you're like, hey, you remember how you saw that flying thing with the ball on the string back in the 70s or whatever? Like, can we talk about it? I can imagine. Like, what was the reaction when you talked to some of these folks?
Well, I'm not like one of those cool researchers in movies who just grabs the phone and, hey, tell me about it. I'm almost too respectful to people's private lives. So I often try very, very safely. I write an email first, sometimes even a written paper letter if they don't have an email or anything. And it's like a little presentation of myself and a quite kind description reference to what they experienced, because it had been a very traumatic experience for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I don't want to fuck up their day, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So often I leave it to that. I write that there's no stress. If you want to talk about it, I'd love to do an interview. I can call you. We can, and I'd say that basically everyone agreed to talk with me. The only one who didn't want to talk, she was very nice, is the woman who in 1977, I think it was, 79, got offered chocolate from two alien beings. But she said that, something happened that night, but I don't feel for talking about it. So I try to ask her once a year, if she's willing to talk about it. But most of them has been very, very grateful that someone wants to listen and someone see importance in this, because I do, I want to hear their story, because sometimes these stories has turned twisted and far from the truth over all these years,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's what I loved about the book, because oftentimes I read these books and it's like, here's this story from 1970 and this kid, and you got his name, and it's like, has anyone ever tried to fucking track these people down and find out, like, A, get the story again from the original source, like, B, because as you said, then it gets printed in another book, and that gets picked up in a third book, and by the time, like, it gets out in 2023, you're on, like, the sixth iteration of the story, and it's changed in little ways that kind of nullify it in a lot of ways. So it's... Yeah, I love that. I salute you, man. I read a lot of books, and it's like, how come there's never any part where you're like, I called the guy, I found him on Facebook and asked him about what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel it's very, very important. And I mean, I'm looking into quite old cases, so often people have passed away, it's not fine. And then I'm just going for the original written report, which you can find at Archives for the Unexplained in Norrköping, Sweden. I'm sure Claes talked about it in 2009.
Sure,
this huge archive, because I feel it's sometimes it obviously kills your darlings when you realize that the case might not be as spectacular as that 70s ufologists, right? But there's often other things which I find make it even more interesting. Details and how they perceive things, how they feel. Because obviously they had an experience that meant something for them. I mean, it's something they probably think about every day or, every week at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always the off chance, like you get somebody on the phone or you're communicating with them or whatever, and they're like, they told their story back in the 70s, and then who knows? Nowadays, in this day and age, they might be like, there's one thing that I remembered like 15 years ago, and it's like, well, since no one's fucking talked to them in 40 years, like, here's a fascinating new detail that they hadn't, that is not on the record anywhere. So there's a chance, if they're willing to talk, that you might get new, fresh details that they didn't even remember or know when they first told the original story. So I think that's a great avenue to pursue, and I'm glad that you're doing it with these Swedish cases. I hope more folks who are doing similar research consider that. And I know exactly what you're saying, where it's like it's a tightrope, because you don't want to dredge up this traumatic experience. So I think what you do sounds like the right way to do it. Sort of a gently be like, hey, I'm out here if you're ready to talk. Don't go banging on their door and be like, hey, what happened with that thing in 1970? I want to know all about it. But yeah, we could find a way to get in touch with more of these people. Yeah, that would be very interesting, I think, and fruitful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really hope. I mean, the project I'm working with now, I hope that will help people to tell their stories, without, getting laughed at or something. Because, people are experiencing so weird things out there. Sometimes they never tell anyone about it. They're just keeping it within them, I mean, I heard stories that are so strange, and I can understand how to talk about these things. You know, it's like where to do it. You know, but I also feel it's part of our culture of storytelling. These kind of stories, I think it's important for them to be able to stay alive. So that's, I mean, I wrote this book in English, of course, because I felt that, okay, some of these stories it's only known within a small bubble of people here in Sweden, and they deserve a larger audience, I think, because it's like that, because they're stories, and I mean stories. I mean, someone have told these stories, which by itself it's a gift somehow. So yeah, they deserve to live on.
Yeah, and like I said, I really hats off to you, man, because it's one of those things I've been wanting to see more of and never do. And then I'm like, holy shit, he actually talked to these people afterwards? Like, oh my God, finally. Well, you ascribe, and I mean, you're, from the book I take it, sort of, obviously, you don't know what this is all about. You're speculating, you're theorizing, you're contemplating this in the book. And I like that a lot. You sort of put a lot of sort of thought into the role of the person in a way. And I thought it was interesting at one point you observe, you say, one might ask why these beings always come to our little planet to ask for help or support. And it is really advice or support. It's really interesting. That is very often the case. It's like, and that even permeates sort of the abduction thing, where it's like they need us. You know, one of the running theories or stories is like, oh, they need to work with our genetics to create a new race of people or whatever because they're dying or something. It's like, it's a very, and sort of you sort of, I feel like it was kind of teasingly where you say, one might ask why, in a sense where it's like, maybe we should ask why. Like maybe this is a psychological, subconscious species yearning, like that we're fucking important, that they need us. Maybe that kind of takes the experiencer, gives them some kind of comfort level where it's like, oh, okay, they're not here to hurt me. They need help from me.
Yeah. Or
our species or something. It's a very interesting observation on your part. And, you know, extrapolate on that if you
well, I feel that, mankind, because I'm a cynic myself, mankind is a horrifying species, but it's also but it's also a quite beautiful, fantastic species, something we should cherish, of course, and everything we've created and done. And I think we're quite good at taking us down, that we don't mean anything. We're nothing in this vast universe. I mean, you have those who, of course, claims that all ancient structures were built with the help of aliens, which is kind of a slap in the face of those civilizations in many ways. And let's see now. I'm on my way with this rant. I'm just going to. What was your first initial?
Well, the idea being that these people, experiencers, the beings, the other, they need our help. Is it in my mind? It's also the question comes up where it's like, is that part of the dance on their part? Is that just to disarm us? To disarm the experiencer, where it's like almost like with a child, where it's like, okay, you go find me that flower over there or whatever. So it's kind of, you wonder in a sense if it's what that dance is all about, what that like we need your help kind of thing is.
Well, you can see it as, once again, I'm not claiming that the phenomenon isn't real, that it's just hallucinations or it's something made up in any way.
Right.
But I also feel that the phenomenon itself is a mirror of ourselves and our consciousness, our beliefs, our cultural structures, whatever it is. So when, for example, when people meet aliens and the aliens tell them that you need to take care of this planet, you need to stop pollution, etc. So it's a part of ourselves that's speaking there. It's some kind of guilt, maybe subconscious guilt. But no matter what, I think that when we study the phenomenon, we study high strangeness cases, whatever it is, we're studying ourselves in one way. To paraphrase or to quote Krishnamurti, the observer is the observed. It's all the same somehow. But of course, that's not an explanation for what it is, because I have no idea what it is.
Right. Well, I think we all grapple with the question of like, not only what is this thing, but also sort of like, what is the purpose behind it?
Yeah.
I think that really is the big question, even more so than sort of like what constitutes these things. It's like, why are they fucking showing up? Why are people having these experiences? Like, is it meant to, as you said, it like sparks this curiosity in them? Is it like meant to do that? Is that why these people have these experiences? Some people have these terrifying experiences. So, it's a very, it's the sort of big question. I don't expect you to know the answer to that. But I think that is what drives us in a way, to try to figure out what the purpose is behind these experiences.
But I think it's pointless to find an answer to what the purpose is, actually. I'm always getting back to Johnny Yeltenny, who in every episode he's in somewhere says that the phenomenon wants us to go out and play, to discover, to have fun. And, I choose to be naive there. I think that might be it. And if we go out and we're prepared to be scared, it might be a frightening experience. If we go out and decide to have fun, which, of course, I understand is not easy when you're getting abducted by someone out in the forest. Right. Scary by itself. But I think that affects a lot how the experience will be, what your attitude is. I mean, I've experienced some stuff which you could call it high strangeness, or within, the Oz factor or things like that. But I've always managed to keep some kind of observer state. I'm more interested in studying it than being happy or afraid or whatever. It just happens and I look at it, and afterwards I say, what the fuck, basically. But
right. Yeah, you mentioned those in the book, some kind of black shadowy mass or something.
Oh, yeah. For example. So Well, I mean, that's probably the safest or most fruitful, again, word way to sort of experience this kind of thing. Just kind of be like, okay, this is happening. I'm going to just go with it and see. Again, you're right. It's tough when they're strapping you to a fucking bed and stick needles in you and shit. But it's like, well. Yeah, I have a deep respect for those who experience that. So I don't mean to make fun of anyone.
No,
here,
not at all. No,
it's more something I've noticed, basically. So
that's like the worst case scenario for an encounter. That's the one you don't want. Now I'm going to put you on the spot here. Hopefully this will draw a laugh from you, because it mentioned at some point your sort of evolution in interest in all this stuff, and you say that you went through my edgelord conspiracy phase. so I told you, man. I picked up the little nuggets that stuck out to me, and I'm like, wait a minute, slow down, friend. Don't go so far. I'm pulling you back on this one. What was your edgelord conspiracy phase?
Well, it was. It's a bit embarrassing. I'm sorry. I promise it wasn't flat Earth or anything like that. It was, you were watching
company here.
You were watching Zeitgeist about 9/11 and such things like that, and I felt. Make no mistake. I still find conspiracy or the conspiracy culture interesting, because it's interesting to study how stories evolve and travel around. And of course there is conspiracies. That's what it is. But I also felt when I've never been extreme. You know, I have I can control myself quite good, but there was a moment. There was a moment where I felt that I was watching everything that came up, and I was reading, and I bought books, and I read it, and I didn't feel good about it.
Right. Yeah.
You know, after I finished something, I just felt this black hole opening up in my chest. You know, this.
Yeah, well, that's it's a very healthy response then on your part, because I think that's what I think other people don't have, that self-awareness, and that's what leads them down a very dark place. Yeah. So it's the fact that you had that self-awareness and kind of, I take it, climbed out of the rabbit hole. That's a good thing.
I mean, my drive in life is often some kind of joyful pleasure with things. I want to feel joy. I want to be happy. I want to be with nice people. And I noticed reading this stuff and reading deeper into it, it's like it didn't make me feel good, and I hate to feel bad. You know, I don't. You know, I mean, the only time I read about stuff like that nowadays is, and here's because I'm an old man, is the JFK assassination. Because it's you know, it's horrible to say, but it feels a bit more innocent than today.
It is. No, it is. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, contemporary conspiracy definitely instills a feeling of like despair and smallness. And it's like, I don't want to feel that way. Like you're pretty, I mean, I kind of like, I think I probably kind of went a little bit through that period too at post 9/11. It was just like, at some point I was like, well, we're fucked. Okay. We're fucked. So there's no, you know, the new world is going to happen. I can't fucking change that. I'm going off to do more Bigfoot UFO stuff because I don't want to just keep being like, well, we're fucked this week, guys. So let's talk about how they're putting fluoride in the water or whatever. They're spraying chemicals in the sky. It's like, oh, all right. I don't want to live like that. You know what I mean? But some people go down that despair rabbit hole. On a similar note, I think we're both cut from the same cloth, where we really just want to have a good time all the time. I thought it really interesting. You said Sweden has, and I like the description here, has a more laid back and mellow UFO culture. What is, I guess the mellow is what kind of like, so what is that? What does that entail? What is the laid back and mellow UFO culture entail? What inspired that description? This is on page 132.
132. I have to take a look here. Where is it? It's
you might have been contrasting it with American ufology. I don't know. Let me see.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's in comparison with Beckley and UFO Universe.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a bit unclear what I mean there, but I mean, if you look at UFO culture from the 80s and 90s and compare it to Swedish, it's like looking at, you know, Las Vegas on mushrooms, basically. You know, in the stories being sold and told in the pure exploitative fashion of it. We never had that in Sweden. We had, of course, smaller magazines and, you know, different kinds of scenes where people made things up, or it was very speculative. But most of the UFO culture actually in Sweden has been within UFO Sweden, who have a very, at least since 1980, a very rational point of view, you know. So it never really goes off into somewhere else, you know. So I think that's my. I mean, I have a couple of issues of UFO Universe, and I love that magazine. It's fantastic, but I don't believe a word in it. Some stuff absolutely, but in Sweden, it's so much drinking coffee, talking quietly over kitchen tables, looking out at the forest, comparing to the more. Make no mistake, I love American ufology, but it's more sometimes more vulgar.
It's a circus.
It's a circus. And that's fun by itself, absolutely. But in Sweden, we don't have that really. It's very, very exotic. I was in Las Vegas quite recently, and I never I've been in the United States before, but I've never been in a place like that. That's absolutely bizarre. And I mentioned it to some Americans, and they said, "Yeah, other Americans feel the same." So,
it's pretty wild. Yeah,
it is. So it's from someone from Sweden who's a quite calm, gray country. It's very strange looking at these old magazines.
Yeah, well, it sounds very refreshing in a sense because, as I said, it is a circus here, which is fun. But eventually, you're like, I'm kind of circused out. I don't want to deal with this circus atmosphere. But is there, without straying too far into the UAP, as I call it, era, which came about, post 2017, has there? Because what a lot of the people nowadays who are just getting into this don't want to know is that they've been fucking pushing the U.S. government for answers on UFOs for decades. So this isn't some new thing.
Yeah.
Was there ever that kind of like movement or push in a sense just to be like, hey, Swedish government, what do you guys know about this from the Swedish ufologists?
Well, I'd say that, I've read tons of older magazines, Swedish magazines about it, where you read, where you can get a quite good overview over the subject. And I could feel that by the end of the 70s, early 80s, there were some push towards that direction that, they have to, maybe not that they're hiding stuff, but they need to be more open about it.
Right. I guess that's kind of part of the question in a sense. Also, the belief, because here it's like there's this belief that the government is hiding UFO. I'm wondering also if that's part of the culture there too, or if it's just like, hey, they probably don't even know what it is, which is like, I wish more people here in America took that perspective, because I think that might be more likely. But I guess that's kind of what I'm wondering too, if there's that belief that there's a grand cover-up or a governmental cover-up of UFOs with the Swedish people, as far as the Swedish government. Like, we all kind of assume the American government's hiding something. That's beside the point.
Well, actually, during recent years, there's been a couple of smaller groups that kind of tries to push this agenda that the Swedish military is hiding something. If you ask me, they don't know anything, or they're aware of normal observations, weird stuff flying around, but nothing too spectacular. Yeah. But this year, 2023, no less than 2 anonymous whistleblowers has come out in Sweden and appeared on podcasts, both with distorted voices. Both of them claim to work within the surveillance intelligence agencies in Sweden, and both of them reveals that one of them reveals that there's been a UFO crash and a possible crash retrieval in the 90s in Sweden, etc., etc. The other one, the first one is quite ridiculous, actually. It feels like he's just making things up. The other one seems a bit more serious until he comes to the part where he claims that aliens built the pyramids. And then I felt anyway. Here's the thing. When they do these references to crash retrievals or UFO crashes in Sweden, they offer references already known cases. But in these interviews, they say that this is, of course, top secret. It's classified. You can't talk about it. But this UFO crash in the 90s were, for example, a very, very interesting incident in 1999 where a triangular shaped object crashes into a lake. There's 7 witnesses, and it flies over them, and it kind of makes a left turn, and so it won't crash into the forest on the other side of the lake, and it goes into the water. So it's obviously something intelligent crashed there. Could, of course, have been some military or something like that, but it crashed there. So I guess that's the crash they're referring to. But that's something it's known now. People know about it if you have some certain knowledge. But no, I wouldn't say in general that people think the military is hiding stuff here in Sweden. Of course, There's stuff regarding, the nation's, what do you say, security.
Absolutely.
Threat things and stuff like that. But compared to the American military, the Swedish military is so open. There's very little, this secrecy. There's very little of this paranoia.
Yeah.
We have military facilities quite close to where we live, and it's like totally chill to walk into those. No one cares really. It's
wow.
It's very, of course not everywhere, but it's a very, very chill relationship between the public and the military here compared to the United States. So that's my long comment on that.
Now you came to America recently. I saw you in America. What were you doing? You mentioned it actually. What were you doing in America during your visit here?
Oh, it was a fantastic trip. We're shooting a documentary series about the UFO phenomenon, and we felt we needed to meet some people in the United States and visit some places to boost things up a little bit. Because, the broadcaster who bought it, they liked the American connection. So, of course, we have to use those darn Pentagon videos a couple of times. Too much.
I see. There you go. Yeah.
But outside of that, we first went to Las Vegas and drove out to Area 51.
Okay, so actually, all right.
Yeah. So, which was, I didn't expect much from it, but I found it to be very, very creepy to be out there, eerie.
Yeah.
It's silent. There's no people, but you still kind of understand that someone is watching you from somewhere. We were at the backdoor drive, I think. And one of those white Jeeps trucks came and blocked the road for us. So we couldn't drive from there, and no one else could drive up to us, which felt very, very, it was scary. I felt paranoid,
Yeah.
And then we went and met a representative of the alien movement in the United States. Yeah, it was a strange experience, weird, but And then we went to San Francisco because we wanted to get into the Seoul conference.
Yes, okay. I heard a little bit about some shenanigans, not on your part, but
that was so bizarre. It felt like we were in the middle of a conspiracy. Yeah. We booked a lot of heavy, cool names, and suddenly they stopped. We didn't hear from them, or they canceled our meetings, like 1 or 2 days before. Yeah. And Avi Loeb told Klaus Swan, who was with us, told him that someone was spreading the rumor that we were a prank team.
Yeah.
Kind of like Borat, something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So we had long conversations with Gary Nolan about it, who was quite aggressive, I'd say, but we said we're willing to pay $1 million if we make fun of you. It's because it's so bizarre. But in the end,
wait, he was aggressive, like you better not make fun of me, kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. It's,
jeez.
But I think also, to be fair, that he was super stressed. He had this huge conference with everyone around, and suddenly this weird fucking Swede shows up and want to do interviews.
Right. I can totally see. Yeah.
I can understand
it. It happens.
But in the end, it worked out well. We did the interviews with Avi Loeb and Leslie Kane and Whitley Strieber, and even Ris van Virk, who is this simulation guy, very, very interesting guy. So we got so much great stuff. And I'm really, really happy we did the trip. And it was, for me, an experience for life,
Nice. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because the conference was sort of like, from what I understand, they tried to be very serious about the subject, and it's like you you can't divorce the absurdity from it. And you experienced it yourself, like where it's like, okay, now there's a rumor going around. It's a Swedish prank show here. It's like you can't, no matter how serious you try to get, you can't escape the absurdity of the phenomenon. It just won't. It won't detach itself from it. So,
absolutely. I mean, after a while, we were laughing about it because it was so absurd. And but I'm just so happy that we became friends with everyone again. It made us miss a couple of interviews, but stuff that happens. But it was an experience, really, and it will be fascinating also to see how the Swedish audience will react to this, because they're known in the United States and internationally, but in Sweden, they don't know who Avi Loeb is or Chris Mellon or they have no idea, or very, very few ideas about it. So we'll see. I'm quite nervous, actually.
And this is going to air on TV in Sweden.
Once again?
Yes, obviously. This is going to air on Swedish TV, right?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's on TV4, which is a big broadcaster.
Okay.
It'll be 4 episodes.
Wow.
I'm the researcher. I'm story producer. I'm in front of the camera. So it's been so cool. I actually started off this 4 years ago with a magical sigil and magical system by Mitch Horowitz, because my 10-day miracle challenge. I was so tired of what I was doing, and I didn't want to do this, and I said, okay, I'm going to try it one more time, or else I will be a therapist or something. So I said, I want to do UFOs on television in front of the camera. And 10 days later, the first telephone call came in offering me work with this paranormal show. And since then, it's been on a roll all the time. It's constantly. So I've been afraid I'm not going to do one of those sigils again, one of those 10-day miracle challenges.
I'm going to look into this 10-day miracle thing. Shit,
yeah,
sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. It's just that it's too much. I need to just relax a bit here.
Now, before I forget this question, this is probably a question you probably never gotten on an interview before, but what the fuck? Was this the Swedish Bachelor you were working on, or the American Bachelor when you were in Africa? Because I'm like, wait, this guy's working on the fucking Bachelor now? Like, where did this come from?
It was the Swedish Bachelor, so you've never seen it, actually.
It sounds pretty cool. You get to hang out in the plains of Africa or whatever.
Yeah, it was awesome. So cool. We lived at the resort. So, and we really, wasn't allowed to leave that resort, but we did anyway. For example, the location were out in the reserve, far out, and we had to there were fucking lions sleeping on the road in the morning. We just had to sit there and wait for them because we couldn't do anything. It was such a cool experience. And as I write about the book, standing there looking up at the Milky Way is still something that gives me, chills because it was so powerful. So sometimes working on those kind of projects can be quite fun, actually.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah, it just was like, I was so like, as I told you, the shit that made you raise my eyebrows, I'm like, all right, make a note of that. And I actually just thought of that just now because I'm like, oh, yeah, there was that thing with The Bachelor. What the fuck was that all about? So,
yeah.
Now, I was looking at the notes from Klaus, and I was wondering, he mentioned this, we don't have to go over the Ghost of Carlson case, but it's this ghost, and I may have butchered the pronunciation, so I apologize. But the Ghost of Carlson case, I'm reading through my recap of the interview with Klaus, and he mentions how she was given a ring and a rod by the visitor, and then UFO Sweden had the ring and the rod, and then it vanished. Did they ever figure out what happened to that thing?
No. It's still lost. Still lost. Probably it is just his daughter who owns these, keeps them hidden away. They had them for a moment during these exhibitions. This was before my time.
Yeah.
And so the daughter took them afterwards. He had actually promised that UFO Sweden would get them after his death.
All right.
But he didn't. So these things are still lost after all these years, which is a pity. They're somewhere. I mean, I listened to the episode with Klaus the other day because I'm curious now. What did he say? As of now, he's quite skeptical about the case itself, but it's such a weird, strange case anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously something that happened to him. He probably mentioned, but they found diary notes from, like, I don't know, the same year or the year after or 2 years after, which referred to these things and these visions he had about meeting these creatures. I mean, he talked officially about it the first time in the 70s. So there was obviously something going on there.
Yeah.
Even earlier, some people say, okay, it's just a business thing. You do a good story and you can sell your medicine, which was something he invented in relationship to this. But there's something more to it. But where, I have no idea. If it's an inside thing or something. If you come to Sweden, you need to visit the UFO monument in Ängelholm. Which he built.
There's a monument?
He built a monument there in like the early 70s. So you can walk through the forest and you can find the whole, the meadow where the UFO landed. And there's a concrete version of the UFO standing there. And he even marked where the grave is, where they they buried the alien bodies there for a couple of hours, for example. It's a cool place. Yeah.
Well, speaking of alien bodies, another part of the book that I really liked a lot was almost not so much the story, which is fantastic. And I'll give folks the thumbnail, like this story that you got tipped off from Brett Swanser, who's been on Binnall of America before, and is a friend of the show. So he had found a story about a UFO that crashed in Sweden, and a dead alien popped out. An alien popped out. He was dying. He spoke like perfect Swedish. He's like, put me in this fucking bag. And then put the bag in the water, and like the water kind of like dissolves the bag and the alien, and so fantastic story. What I really liked is you kind of take us through the process of how you were like trying to track this down, and remarkably, it sounds like it didn't. It sounds like it at least it's within the realm of possibility. It's not at first you were kind of like, oh, I think this might have been a bullshit story made up, but then as time went on, you got closer and closer to kind of finding the guy who's since passed away who wrote the story. And it's like, okay, well, certainly this dude seemed to be doing a good faith reporting on this account. Oh yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I didn't know, and he's passed away. But I mean, even if there's truth in that he actually met the guy who told him this story, I feel there is something to it. Maybe just very, very distorted from how it was from the beginning. But I still haven't found. I haven't been able to go deeper into the story to actually see. If there is, someone out there like the brothers he mentions in it, trust me, I've been really trying to pinpoint it on maps and look at companies from the time who did forest works, etc., but never really gotten closer to the mystery. But it is a very, very good story and very, very similar to this UFO contactee book that was published earlier. I don't remember the title of it at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, it's one of those stories that lives on. And I like hoaxers, even if this is a hoax or totally made up. I truly, truly enjoy when people make up stories that gets their own lives and continues to spread. And you can discuss the morality of that. Is that okay to do? But I mean, it's so much anyway in this business with weird stories. Sometimes you have absolutely no idea you probably can't even find the source for it. It just appears suddenly.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. I do enjoy that a lot. I mean, sometimes these old stories creates new stories maybe real stories, or experiences. And they kind of give a frame to other people's experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's a certain school of thought that's like, if a hoax gets put out, it can generate some version of whatever you just put out into the ether. So it's like, people scorn the hoax, but there could be some kind of like mechanism at work there. Who knows?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so I like about the book too, where you're not like a true believer in any sense of the word. You're kind of like, this could be a hoax. This could be a misidentification. At one point, there's a story of some kids are running down a road and they see some beings come out. And like, God bless you, man. Like in the book, you're like, this could have been moonshiners because it was a cave they ran out of. And it was like, yeah, we can't discount the moonshiners here. This is totally possible.
Yeah, but I mean, in that case, I think I write that the most important thing is his own experience from it. What did it give to him? And happily, it made him a happy person. I mean, I totally understand if this, brings you in the total opposite direction, of course. But there is something with this highly personal experience of something. I think that's a lot more important than, sometimes it's more important than evidence or prints or whatever. If it makes you happy, good.
Right. Well, I said this the other night when we were taping the Year in Review show, where it's like, the longer you're in this, you kind of come to the conclusion, the realization, where it's like, the phenomenon, yes, it comes in many colors and many variations, but it's like, it really never fucking changes. It's like the people are the ones who change. Like the people who experience the thing change. The people who get mixed up in researching this stuff, they change. It's like the phenomenon, it causes this change in people, while actually kind of being fairly fucking static, despite coming at you in different variations and flavors. So the mystery remains the same for always, but it changes the people in a way that I think it's got lost in the original sort of early era of like looking into this, that now more people are kind of like, well, how'd that affect you? What happened to you afterwards? So that's an area to discuss. And what I really like to throw back to sort of Swedish ufology, I don't know, maybe you can speak to this. I mean, you've kind of lit a fire under me in a way where it's like, I think maybe as we go forward here in 2024, I'm going to try and get back to how Klaus Von ended up on Binnall of America in the first place, which was like, I need to start talking to these people, English-speaking researchers in other countries, to find out the history in these other countries. What I really love, I remember from talking to Klaus and from reading this book especially, it's just how vivid and rich the history of ufology in Sweden is. I'm kind of left wondering if it's similar in other countries. I'm sure it is, but it seemed particularly vivid in UFO Sweden. I suppose that's a testament to the Swedish ufologists, to the people, to Klaus and the folks who really put this all together and kind of kept this going in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and stuff. Because it's like, you're referencing all kinds of magazines. There's a huge archive there. It's like, there is a fucking wealth of information on UFOs in Sweden. It's really crazy.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons of it. Absolutely. I mean, if you ever visit Sweden, visit the archive, you won't believe your eyes, basically. Yeah. Sweden is often teased by our friendly neighboring countries, Norway, Finland, and Denmark. They tease us for being a little bit too bureaucratic and dry sometimes. But if that's true, I think it kind of helps when it comes to things like this, because we love to just keep things in order. We like to collect stuff. We like to, work with archives and look at things in a very, very, not very, but quite rational way. I think if something is true about Sweden, I think that might be true, and it helped us having, I would say, a very solid, stable ufology, at least nowadays.
Yeah, it's tremendous. I remember being blown away. Like I said, when I talked to Klaus, it was just like, holy shit! This is like, you guys have a really well documented history of the phenomenon. And I'm left wondering sort of how much that applies to other countries. And yeah, I think it's also with Sweden, it might be a combination of this personality trait you're describing plus the sort of openness to the folkloric aspect of like the gnomes and the elves and stuff. It's kind of like the perfect storm to look at this mystery in a way.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I mean, I think it's helped a lot that we're quite open to ghosts. People are quite willing to talk about ghosts, and I think that helped a lot. Even like I mentioned before, it's still a little bit stigma with all this weirdness, but it's getting more open, more okay to talk about it. And I hope that UFO Sverige, UFO Sweden has helped out with that. People shouldn't be afraid to contact us. We might try to find an answer without a doubt, but there's no blind belief or there's no, hardcore debunker style thing. It's more like, what the heck is it? Let's see. If
let's take a look at it. Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. You mentioned the whistleblowers coming out. It's got to be like something in the air. It's got to be like in the zeitgeist because you got the David Grush guy coming out, then you got these people, whistleblowers in Sweden. I think there's sort of whatever the mood here in America is, it might be like spreading to other parts of the world. Although I often wonder, there's so many. You're on social media. So many angry UAP buffs from England. I'm always just like, why are you so fucking angry? And B, why don't you bother your own government about this, dude? They're so fired up about American disclosure. It's like, you got a government on your own, man. Like, why don't you guys just hassling whoever the version of your Congress people are? It seems I've always kind of wondered about that. It's like,
I mean, it's kind of sad, because the UAP bros, as I call them here in Sweden, are. I mean, I have friends there. It's fine. But you have some quite extreme, very angry persons who actually think that UFO Sweden is part of the cover-up that were paid off by the CIA to hide the truth about UFOs. And that kind of, how to debate with that, how to even...
You can't,
Exactly. It's like so absurd, I always tell people, just if these people just could do their thing, they could write emails to the Swedish military. They could be interested in UFOs, be happy. Why this anger? Why this bitterness and paranoia? It takes away all the fun with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been a recurring theme on the show since we relaunched and everything. Yeah, it's like the UAP scene. There's that anger underneath it all, and it's taken a lot of the fun out of it because it's a sense of entitlement. It's like, why are you, exactly. Like, why are you so fucking angry about this? I say it's just flying saucers. Like, this is supposed to be fun. I don't know why. Oh man.
Yeah, I totally agree. For me, UFOs are fun, and that's how I'm gonna, that's how I'm gonna continue to look at it. It's something and something it needs to give me something. It's weird how people works, but I'm trying to be, I'm trying to not provoke them too much,
No, I know. Oh, yes. I don't think they listen to Binnall America anymore. So,
well, maybe they do in secret,
I'm sure some do. When I shit all over their dreams, they're like, "All right, I don't think I like this guy anymore." But hey, I don't know what to tell you guys. Well, it's interesting. I'm going to let you go in a few minutes, so don't worry. But it is interesting. I talked about. I don't know if it was Vasily Egger or Steve Berg, I think. We talked about this on the show where it's like and I hate to, I'm not name dropping folks. I'm just sort of providing footnotes for Binnall America listeners who are like, you already fucking talked about, so, that's kind of, so I can classify it in my head. It is interesting that we talked earlier about we don't see these humanoid encounters anymore. It's like it's like all this shit's like so hard to find because it's spread out all over social media now. But there are I think you do find, not you personally, but I think us as interested parties can find this stuff, but you have to find it like in these fucking far-flung social media circles where before it would just be in the county newspaper or in the local newspaper or something like that. So I think that's part of the challenge. But also the democratization of the internet allows for these stories to get out there. So it's an interesting conundrum, if you will. I don't even know. There's no question attached to that. That's just kind of me rambling. But I noticed that you do, like you said, you found all these goblin stories, or I think you said gnome stories on the Facebook pages and stuff like that. It's like you got to kind of go there to get any information nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for example, the Facebook group is fantastic. It's like a treasure. What do you say? Treasure trove? Treasure of people's stories that they will never write down anywhere else. I mean, you have this ordinary post where people say, "Hey, have you met any gnomes?" And suddenly you have 150 stories about people talking about it, which is like amazing. I'm surprised that there is no one from the Folklore Institute, I don't know what you call it in Sweden, who's not sitting there copying all of this.
Exactly.
I try to do it instead because you could say, oh, it's on Facebook, but it's still folklore. It doesn't matter if your grandma said it or this crazy lady on Facebook. It's still a story that's being delivered.
Yeah, Facebook has replaced the local bar in a lot of ways. So it's like, as far as we're going to hear a story like that. So it's it's really, it's like for better or for worse. You got to kind of, it's like Wikipedia. Yeah. It's like, I know it's kind of shitty, but it's like the best place to get the information from. So. So you got will people be able to see? Obviously, it's going to be Swedish, but I assume the interviews are kind of in American. I mean, for interested parties, are they going to be able to see this on YouTube or whatever when the TV show comes out?
Well, I'm sure.
And when do you think that'll be coming out?
In March, I think the first episode is aired, and if you, I guess probably if you have VPN. You can set it to Sweden, and you can look at the TV4 broadcaster app.
Okay, that makes sense.
It could work, but it's made for Sweden, which is kind of sad because I think it's so much fun and it's a
it'd be cool to see. That's what I was asking. Yeah, it'd be fun.
So we'll see. I hope at least. There will be some way for people to see it. We'll see. I don't know yet. Yeah. So,
well, I'm fascinated by this Swedish UFO culture, like I said, because you're citing podcasts and shit, and it's like they have podcasts. This is wild. I don't know why I feel so. I think it's the language barrier or something, but I'm just like, oh wow, we are all the same. We are all kind of trying to figure this out. So. And you're the host of a podcast, right, over in Sweden. And you guys all obviously speak Swedish. It's like, what the fuck?
It's a Swedish one. It's called Märklighetsfaktorn. It's a good one. We're recording episode 100 here in a couple of weeks. Wow. Just about the latest high strangeness news from all around the world, like the 2 weeks or something. So that means it's a lot of baby cam ghosts and stuff like that, of course. But
that's how I make my money.
Yeah. and other lots of dash cams and lots of surveillance.
Dash cams, surveillance, yes, ring cameras, God bless them.
I admit that sometimes when I don't have any good story, I just check what you've written and I see if I can do something with that. So,
you don't have to say it that way.
I'm not copying it. I'm just using it as a story.
Absolutely not. No. I try to dig up as much as I can from all around the world, but more often than not, these videos are like. Mm-hmm. When I see a really good one, then I'm like, wow, that's really good. Other times I'm just kind of like, I don't know about that one.
So it's been a lot of help.
There you go. So the website for folks who want to check it out is Fred Andersson with 2 S's .se, The book is Northern Lights, High Strangeness in Sweden. You get that right off Amazon. So, that should be easy for folks to get. FredAnderson.se. And let me see. Tell me your socials. That way I don't have to open the book and try.
Well, I think the best social media to follow me is Homo Satanis on Instagram and Twitter and Blue Sky, wherever I am nowadays. Threads. I don't know. It's confusing, everything. But,
yes, you're in the same kind of boat I am, where it's like, I don't want to be on Twitter, but I have no other real option. And it's like, I'd rather leave here. It's like being at a really shitty party with, like, someone you really like. It's like, it's like, or a group of people you really like. So it's like, there's a group of you, you're all at a shitty party, and you're like, where should we go? And it's like, we should go here, we should go there, we should go there. It's like, let's just fucking stay here, and we'll endure the shittiness of this party, right? It's not like the fucking mood and weird Twitter or whatever. It's just like, we all don't want to fucking be here, but there's nowhere a place everyone can agree to go.
Yeah, that's very well put. I totally agree with you there. So,
what is this? All right. A book for the next guest that's going to be Jesus.
Whoa.
Oh, boy. So what do you, obviously the TV show, that's a big thing in Sweden, but like, are you going to do more English shit? Because your book's fantastic. I want to read more of your stuff. So do you have any plans for forthcoming books? It's the classic "What's next for you" show. Before I let you enjoy your evening.
It's 10 o'clock here now. It's my plan, and I'm not stressing it, is to write a book about gnomes, Swedish gnomes. And I've begun slowly. I've gathered research, and I've written a little bit here and there. So I hope that will be the next one. But I'm not going to stress it. The first book, the first draft, I wrote very, very fast. And then I just did small things for like a year after, or 2 years after.
It's probably a good way to do it.
Yeah, it is. I will try to do something similar here, but I need to maybe write it with a more clear understanding where I'm going with it.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But that's the plan.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope to see more of your stuff. I absolutely love the book. Like I said, it was really beautifully written and very thoughtful and conversational and fantastic. And I highly encourage all the Binnall America listeners to pick it up. I think you'd really enjoy it. I really did. I devoured it. I was like, this is a fun read. That's kind of the best way I can describe it in a lot of ways. It was just a lot of fun to read. And I was, as you probably could tell, maybe when we started, I was just so excited. I'm like, oh, it's going to be fucking awesome. I can't wait. We're going to really dig into this fucking book, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I had a blast talking to you, Fred. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and giving us so much of your time and everything. And I wish you the best of luck in the future. And I hope we can talk again, down the line, brother.
Thank you. Thank you so much.